Cops stop black man for trespassing at his own home, then realize he's the FBI agent in charge. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. Step away from the car, sir. This neighborhood doesn't need trouble. The words cut through the afternoon like a siren. Loud, dismissive, the kind of tone that assumed guilt before understanding. A white patrol car blocked the driveway of a quiet suburban home. Blue lights strobed against the glass facades and perfect lawns. The air shimmered in the heat. At the center of it all stood Marcus Reed, tall, sharp suit pressed to perfection, one hand resting on the door of his white BMW. He didn't move. Two officers advanced, hands near their holsters, every motion fueled by suspicion. Behind them, a few neighbors peered from their porches, phones half raised. A woman in yoga clothes whispered, "He doesn't live here," another man muttered. "You see that car? Doesn't belong on this street." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Officers, is there a problem?" "Yeah," the older one snapped. "You, step away from the vehicle. We got a report of trespassing." He looked toward the gate behind him, his gate. The key fob in his hand still blinked green. "This is my property," Marcus said evenly. The younger cop smirked. "Sure it is, big guy. You mind showing proof before we make this official?" "Eat his one a day." Marcus studied them, the posture, the hands twitching near metal. The same choreography he'd seen 1,000 times in interrogation footage. But this time, he was in the frame. He raised both hands slowly, palms open. "You're making a mistake. Don't tell us how to do our job," the older one barked. A third cruiser pulled up. More uniforms, more eyes. The heat thickened with adrenaline and arrogance. Marcus's phone vibrated in his pocket, a reminder for a 2 p.m. briefing with the Bureau. He ignored it. "Let me get this straight," he said calmly, his voice carrying the weight of command disguised as patience. "You're detaining a man on his own driveway?" The cop laughed. "Driveway, mansion, castle doesn't matter when you don't belong here." The crowd grew. Neighbors recording now. Someone whispered, "He looks dangerous." Another voice, "Look at the suit. Probably a scammer." It bang. "It is not bring for Graham." Marcus's jaw tightened. His silence wasn't surrender, it was a calculation. Every muscle in his body balanced between restraint and authority. The senior officer stepped closer, cuffs glinting in the sun. "Hands behind your back." Marcus didn't flinch. He reached inside his jacket, slow enough to make them twitch. One officer drew his weapon. "Don't move." Marcus stopped mid-motion, eyes locked on the trembling barrel. "You sure you want to do that?" He finished the motion, not fast, not slow, and brought out a black leather badge case. With a single flick, it opened. Gold glinted in the sunlight. Blue letters read, "Federal Bureau of Investigation." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the cicadas seemed to stop. The officer holding the gun froze. The younger one's mouth opened slightly. A woman in the crowd gasped. Marcus stepped forward once, his voice low but clear. "Now, identify yourselves." For a heartbeat, the world stopped turning. The power in the scene reversed, quietly, completely. The air froze before anyone could breathe. The gold badge in Marcus's hand caught the sunlight, flashing like judgment itself. Around him, everything stopped, the murmurs, the footsteps, even the cicadas. The tension was suddenly fragile, like a string stretched too tight. The officer, who had shouted moments ago, stood paralyzed, his gun still half raised. The younger one swallowed hard, unsure whether to holster or apologize. Behind them, the third officer's face went pale, lips moving but producing no sound. The word FBI burned into their retinas, rewriting the story in real time. Neighbors on their lawns lowered their phones, uncertain whether to keep filming or to pretend they'd seen nothing. The woman in yoga clothes whispered, "Oh my God." "They actually worked to guard her," her husband muttered. "He's FBI?" The street fell into that strange, electric silence that only comes when arrogance meets truth. Marcus didn't move. He let the quiet do its work. That calm was his weapon. Finally, the senior officer cleared his throat, voice trembling. Sir, we didn't realize. Marcus's gaze met his. Cold. Precise. You didn't ask, he said softly. It wasn't anger, it was disappointment, sharpened into authority. The officer tried to recover. We got a report of a suspicious person. Marcus interrupted. Suspicious? In my own driveway. He took a step forward. They flinched. He kept his tone even. Do you understand what happens when you point a gun at a federal agent without cause? The older cop looked down. Sir, it was protocol? Marcus asked. Then your protocol is broken. The crowd shifted, whispering. Someone in the back called out, You guys messed up. A few people chuckled nervously. Phones began recording again, this time from new angles, the ones that mattered. Marcus let the silence stretch just long enough to make them feel the weight of it. Now, he said quietly, you're going to lower your weapon, and you're going to call your supervisor. Tell them Agent Marcus Reed of the Federal Bureau of Investigation just witnessed an unlawful stop. The younger officer holstered his gun immediately. The older one hesitated, glancing toward the patrol car as if hoping the flashing lights might save him. They didn't. Marcus didn't raise his voice, but the command in it filled the space like thunder. I said, call your supervisor. The officer reached for his radio with shaking hands. Dispatch. We need a senior unit at... Marcus interrupted again. Say it clearly. You stopped an FBI agent at his own residence. His voice was calm, almost surgical. Every syllable cut through the humid air. From the corner of his eye, Marcus noticed a teenager across the street, still recording. The kid's camera captured the detail, the officer's trembling hand, the shining badge, the calm in Marcus's expression. This video would go viral within hours. But Marcus wasn't thinking about that. He was thinking about his mother, the woman who'd told him that dignity, when tested, must stand taller than anger. He spoke once more, steady and quiet. Power doesn't give you permission to humiliate people. It gives you responsibility to protect them. The officer lowered his radio, eyes wet with shame. Somewhere down the street, a siren wailed backup or salvation. No one could tell. The sunlight glared off Marcus's badge again, and for a heartbeat, the scene looked less like chaos and more like a courtroom without walls. No shouting, no fight, just truth, standing where prejudice had tried to grow. And for the first time that day, the officers realized the silence wasn't fear, it was authority finally recognized. For a long second, no one dared move. The suburban street, once so pristine and proud, felt smaller now, shrunken under the weight of its own prejudice. The badge still glimmered in Marcus's hand, and behind his eyes, the story that built that badge flickered like a reel of film. Every moment that had led him to this exact second of quiet reckoning. 12 years earlier, a younger Marcus Reed had stood at Quantico, shoulders squared, reciting the oath to protect and serve, with a voice that carried conviction but not arrogance. He had been one of 3 black recruits in his class, the only one to graduate with honors. You're too calm for this line of work, his instructor had said. Marcus had smiled then, the same patient smile he wore now. Calm saves lives. He'd spent years in the Bureau's counterterrorism division, chasing leads across oceans, learning to read patterns in chaos. He'd negotiated with arms traffickers in Prague, tracked extremists through encrypted networks, and written the very protocols these small-town officers claimed to follow. Every decision had cost him a piece of peace, but it had built his quiet authority. And yet, here he was accused of trespassing on his own property. Back in the present, the sound of cicadas crept back in. A neighbor's sprinkler hissed to life. The heat pressed down on the moment like a sentence still waiting to be read. Marcus finally slid his badge back into his jacket. Slow, deliberate. You know, he said, looking at the senior officer, I joined the Bureau to prevent mistakes like this. The officer said nothing. His face was red now, not from the sun, but from shame. Marcus stepped closer, not menacing, but unyielding. I've seen this before. Men with authority confusing it for power. You think the uniform protects you. It doesn't. Integrity does. The younger cop spoke up, voice cracking. We were just doing what we thought was right. Marcus turned to him, eyes steady. Then think better. He looked around at the onlookers, faces frozen between guilt and fascination. Most of them had seen him move into the house last week, but few had ever said hello. They'd seen a black man in a suit and made their conclusions. He could have exposed them all right there. He could have demanded their apologies, filed complaints, made headlines. But instead, he did what the powerful always do when true strength is tested. He stayed composed. From his pocket, Marcus pulled out his phone, dialing a number memorized by heart. The officers stiffened again. "Read," he said into the receiver, his tone clipped. "I need confirmation on a local jurisdiction matter. 3 officers. Misconduct in progress. Send a supervisor from Chicago field office." He ended the call before they could respond. The older cop blinked. "Sir, please. That won't be necessary." Marcus regarded him with quiet gravity. "It already is." Across the street, the teenager's camera was still rolling. The frame caught everything: the posture, the silence, the difference between authority earned and authority abused. Marcus's voice softened, more to himself than anyone else. "I moved my mother here because I thought this neighborhood was safe." He looked back toward the front door of the house. Her curtains were drawn, but he knew she was watching. "She taught me that safety isn't about gates or guards. It's about respect. Seems I'm still fighting for that." He turned back toward the officers, whose hands now hung limp at their sides. "You'll stay right here until your command arrives. That's an order." The authority in his voice left no room for argument. And though he spoke softly, the street seemed to echo with something larger, like history itself was taking notes. In that still heat, Marcus stood unshaken, the past flickering quietly behind his eyes. He wasn't just a man defending his property. He was the embodiment of every lesson that prejudice had failed to learn. Justice, he thought, doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it wears a badge and remembers what it means. The sound of approaching engines rolled through the neighborhood, low, heavy, authoritative. 3 black SUVs turned the corner, their tinted windows reflecting sunlight like mirrors of consequence. The crowd murmured. The local officers stiffened instinctively. They didn't need to read the emblems to know what those vehicles meant. FBI. Marcus didn't turn around. He just watched the officers in front of him, the same men who, 10 minutes earlier, had decided he didn't belong. Their arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the panic of men realizing the floor beneath them was giving way. From the first SUV, Special Agent Rivera stepped out, Latina, late 40 seconds, composed, her badge visible even before she spoke. "Agent Reed," she called out, voice clear, cutting through the heat. "We received your call. It is a rate had of the Dable Gay while." Every head turned toward Marcus. The silence that followed was almost ceremonial. He nodded once. "Thank you for responding quickly." Rivera's gaze swept across the scene, the drawn weapons now lowered, the shame in every uniformed face, the spectators whispering like a jury waiting for a verdict. Her jaw tightened. "Which officers initiated the stop?" The senior cop cleared his throat, attempting dignity. "Ma'am, we were conducting a routine." Rivera raised a hand. "Stop talking." Her tone was not loud, but it silenced him like a commandment. She turned to Marcus. "You want us to take it from here?" Marcus's voice was calm, but there was an edge of something deeper, not anger, but truth sharpened by restraint. "No, I want them to hear it from me." He stepped closer to the officers, closing the distance until they had no choice but to meet his eyes. "You drew your guns on a man standing in front of his own home," he said slowly. "You didn't ask questions. You didn't check ID. You assumed." The older officer opened his mouth, but Marcus cut him off one word at a time. "You assumed. Wrong." The crowd behind him shifted, whispering louder now, some recording, some frozen. "Do you have any idea," Marcus continued, "how many people have died because of assumptions like that?" The question wasn't rhetorical. It hung in the air like a charge. No one answered. Rivera watched him, not interfering, not rescuing. She knew this wasn't just about protocol. This was about dignity being restored, publicly, precisely. Marcus pointed toward the patrol car. "You thought your badge made you powerful. It doesn't. It makes you accountable." The younger cop's eyes glistened. "Sir, we didn't know who you were." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "That's the problem, officer. You only show respect when you know someone is somebody." A ripple went through the onlookers. That line, sharp, true, unfiltered, hit the heart of the moment. He took another step forward, until his reflection appeared in the older officer's sunglasses. "Do you understand how fast this could have gone wrong? How close you came to turning your mistake into tragedy?" The officer nodded weakly. Yes, sir. Marcus exhaled slowly. Then remember it, he turned slightly, addressing Rivera. File the incident as misconduct formal review. I'll provide my report before evening. Rivera gave a crisp nod. Understood. The officers looked at each other pale, small, stripped of the illusion of authority. The younger one finally whispered, We're sorry. Marcus studied him. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, apology isn't the end of accountability. It's the start of it. He glanced toward the neighbors, who were still filming. You can put your phones down, he said softly. The point's been made. The woman in yoga clothes lowered her camera first. The others followed, one by one. Marcus adjusted his tie, looked toward the gleaming gate behind him, then back at the officers. Next time you see a man like me, he said, don't see a threat, see a citizen. And with that, he turned away not in victory, but in composure. Behind him, Rivera spoke quietly into her radio. Scene secured. But it wasn't the scene that was secure now. It was something deeper. A truth restored. A balance reclaimed. For the first time since they arrived, the air felt breathable again. The neighborhood had fallen into that eerie quiet that follows public shame, a silence thick enough to feel. The crowd lingered, pretending to disperse but still watching from driveways and behind curtains. The flashing lights from the patrol cars cast lazy reflections over manicured lawns. The chaos was gone, but its echo stayed. Marcus stood near the gate of his home, phone in hand, posture composed, voice measured. Yes, Agent Rivera, he said into the receiver. I'll file the report myself. Have internal affairs loop in the Civil Rights Division. His tone was calm, procedural, but every word was an earthquake under the surface. The officers who had confronted him were standing a few paces away, heads lowered, radios silent. The senior one fidgeted with his cuffs, glancing toward Marcus like a student waiting for a verdict. The younger one just stared at the ground, face pale, jaw tight. Rivera closed the SUV door and approached, her boots crunching softly on the gravel. You sure you want to push this up the chain? She asked quietly. It'll make noise. You know how they react when it's one of our own, calling out the local PD. Marcus's eyes didn't leave the two men. If I stay silent, the next man won't have a badge to protect him, maybe not even a chance to explain. He slid his phone into his pocket. I've been in war zones that felt less dangerous than standing on my own lawn. Rivera nodded once. She understood. We'll start with the report. You're covered, Marcus. As she walked back toward her vehicle, the older officer found his courage again. Sir, he said, voice trembling, we didn't mean any disrespect. Marcus turned slowly. You just didn't mean to get caught. The officer flinched as if struck. Listen carefully, Marcus continued. You may forget this moment in a week, but I won't. My neighbors won't. And that camera, he nodded toward the teenager, still recording from across the street, it won't either. The kid lowered his phone slightly, realizing he was part of something much larger than a viral clip. Marcus's phone buzzed again, a call from Washington. He glanced at the screen and answered. Read here. Marcus, said the voice on the other end, steady but sharp. I just got word of an incident at your address. You all right? Fine, Marcus replied. But 3 local officers aren't. The voice sighed. Do you want us to pull the case into federal review? Marcus looked at the 2 men in uniform, standing small under the weight of their mistake. He thought of his mother watching from the window, of every black man who never had the chance to say, This is my house. Yes, he said finally. Make it official. A brief pause. Then, consider it done. It is a gone? When the call ended, Marcus slipped the phone away and looked out over the quiet street. The breeze shifted, carrying the faint hum of a lawnmower somewhere down the block, the sound of a neighborhood returning to normal, pretending it hadn't just witnessed a lesson written in daylight. The younger officer took a hesitant step forward. Sir, what happens now? Marcus's answer came like a verdict. Accountability, then training, then change if you're lucky. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The calm in his tone carried more authority than any shouted order. From her SUV, Rivera called out, We'll take it from here, Agent Reed. He nodded once and turned toward his front door. The reflection of his badge caught in the window pane as he passed one glint of gold before disappearing inside. Behind him, the officers remained frozen, the weight of their own actions pressing harder than any command could. The wind stirred the American flag above the porch. Quiet, steady, unflinching. Justice didn't shout that day. It just dialed the right number and let the consequences ring. By the next morning, the video had already found its way onto every major social platform. A 43-second clip titled "Cops Stop FBI Agent in His Own Driveway" racked up millions of views overnight. The image was unmistakable. Marcus standing still, badge gleaming in sunlight, surrounded by officers who suddenly looked like schoolboys caught cheating on an exam. Cable news anchors dissected the footage from every angle. "What we're seeing here," one analyst said, "isn't just a mistake, it's the mirror of a broken assumption." Hashtags multiplied like wildfire. Number Agent Reed, number This Is My House, number Accountability in uniform. At the Chicago field office, the mood was clinical but charged. Marcus walked through the glass doors, wearing the same calm expression he'd worn on his lawn. Colleagues nodded at him, some out of respect, others out of quiet awe. He was not a man seeking sympathy. He was a man walking into history. In a corner office, Assistant Director Coleman stood waiting, a printed report in his hand. "You caused quite a stir," he said. Marcus remained standing. "I didn't cause it. I just didn't cover it up." Coleman studied him for a beat, then nodded. "Internal affairs will take over the case. But make no mistake, Washington's watching. You'll have to testify publicly." "I know," Marcus said. "It's not the first time I've had to explain a war I didn't start. Our great men." Later that day, he sat in a congressional hearing room, a quiet storm behind a mahogany nameplate, Special Agent Marcus Reed. The committee chair asked the predictable question, "Agent Reed, do you believe this incident represents a pattern of behavior?" He looked her straight in the eye. "Ma'am, it represents a pattern of assumption. An assumption, when armed, becomes danger." The room fell silent. Pens stopped moving. Even the cameras paused as if they understood gravity. Outside the building, protesters gathered, peaceful, diverse, carrying signs that read, "Justice starts with recognition." Marcus's face appeared on posters not as a victim, but as a symbol of restraint. Meanwhile, at the small-town precinct where the officers had once strutted with pride, doors now slammed in shame. The police chief held a press conference, voice tight with damage control. "The officers involved have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation," he said. "We respect Agent Reed's service and are cooperating fully with federal review." It was the sanitized language of guilt. Inside that same precinct, the older officer from the driveway sat alone in an interrogation room. No lights flashing, no audience, just silence and regret. The younger one sat in another room, staring at the reflection of his badge on the table, as if trying to remember what it once meant. Back in his office, Marcus scrolled through messages. He hadn't asked for letters from parents, veterans, even cops from other states, thanking him for staying calm when they knew how easily it could have gone another way. He paused on one message from a retired officer in Detroit. "You didn't yell. You didn't fight. You made us look at ourselves. That's real leadership. They wanted to mean it." He closed his phone, the weight of the words heavier than any applause. As the sun sank over Chicago, Marcus stood by his window overlooking the skyline, glass towers catching fire in the last light. Rivera entered quietly. "You've started something," she said. He turned slightly. "I didn't start it. I just refused to let it slide." "You know they're calling this the Reed Protocol now?" she said with a faint smile. "Every academy in the state is about to include it in training." Marcus didn't smile back. His voice stayed even, thoughtful. "Good. Maybe next time, someone won't have to pull a badge to be believed." The city lights blinked alive beneath them, reflections of a world slowly trying to correct itself. Rivera looked at him, pride in her eyes. "You think it'll make a difference?" Marcus exhaled, watching the horizon fade into night. "It already did," he said quietly. They hesitated. That means they're learning. The camera would fade on that moment, the quiet triumph of a man who never raised his voice, yet moved an entire system by standing still. By the end of the week, the story had crossed every border. Morning shows ran it beside images of protests and policy panels. One headline read, "When a Badge Meets Bias, the Marcus Reed Case." Another called him, "The Man Who Made Silence Powerful Again." Marcus never watched the coverage. He was back to work, sitting in a sterile briefing room surrounded by younger agents who looked at him differently now, not just as a senior officer, but as the man who'd turned restraint into revolution. Sir, one rookie asked hesitantly, what did it feel like? Standing there, knowing they saw you as a suspect? Marcus considered the question for a moment. It felt familiar, he said quietly. It felt like every time I had to prove what should have been assumed that I belong. No one spoke after that. The silence was its own training. Outside, the public conversation had taken on a life of its own. The viral clip had sparked an avalanche of reactions. Civil rights leaders praising his composure, police unions scrambling to control narrative, and citizens debating what justice looked like in daylight. Late-night hosts turned his line. You only show respect when you know someone is somebody into a quote replayed across timelines, classrooms, and dinner tables. In a university lecture hall in Atlanta, a professor paused a criminology class to replay the clip. Watch his posture, she said. That's power without aggression. That's what real reform looks like. But not everyone was celebrating. On fringe channels, pundits called him a provocateur, claiming he embarrassed law enforcement. Marcus ignored them. Truth didn't need their permission. At home, his mother watched every segment with quiet pride. The curtains that had once concealed her fear now framed her dignity. She told a reporter who managed to reach her, "He's been calm since he was a boy. I used to tell him when the world raises its voice, lower yours. They'll hear you better that way." Across the country, police departments began referencing the Reid Review, a policy check to prevent profiling in field operations. The Department of Justice released a memo calling for national bias response training. No official admitted it, but everyone knew whose name had pushed it forward. Late one evening, Marcus received a call from an unknown number. "Agent Reid," a gravelly voice said, "this is Chief Donnelly, the department involved in your case." Marcus didn't respond right away. "I wanted you to know," the chief continued, "those officers resigned this morning. I've issued a formal apology. And I've started mandatory retraining for the whole precinct. It's not enough, I know. But it's a start." Marcus's voice was steady. "A start is better than silence, Chief." When the call ended, he sat in the quiet hum of his office. The city outside looked different now, not healed, but aware. The door opened. Rivera leaned against the frame. "You realize," she said, half smiling, "you've become the face of accountability." Marcus looked up, tired but centered. "Accountability shouldn't have a face, it should be a habit." She crossed her arms. "And yet, it took yours to remind them." He said nothing. Instead, he looked at the badge on his desk, the same one that had once caught the sunlight like a shield. Now, it felt heavier, almost sacred. Outside, a bus rolled past the building. On its side was a poster, a still image of him from that day, the headline beneath it reading, "Calm isn't weakness, it's control." Rivera followed his gaze. "You didn't plan to be a symbol, did you?" He shook his head slowly. "Symbols fade. Systems stay. That's what I'm after." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence, that familiar, patient silence that always seemed to follow him. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added softly, "Maybe if they remember how still I stood, they'll think twice before pulling the trigger next time." And just like that, the noise of the world outside seemed to quiet again as if listening. A month later, the country was still talking not about Marcus Reid the man, but about what he represented. His name had become shorthand for a movement that didn't need slogans or marches to be heard. The Reid Standard, as the media called it, had forced police departments and training academies to examine not just their procedures, but their instincts. In Washington, the Bureau's director stood at a podium beneath the seal of the FBI, cameras flashing. "Today," she said, "we're implementing new federal bias intervention protocols in all law enforcement agencies, inspired by the actions of Special Agent Marcus Reid." Applause echoed through the room, crisp and restrained. Marcus, sitting in the second row beside Rivera, didn't clap. He simply inclined his head acknowledgement without celebration. Rivera leaned toward him, whispering, "You just rewrote a chapter in federal policy. It is a longer brom." Marcus's answer was quiet. "I just refused to be quiet when it mattered." After the ceremony, reporters swarmed him as he exited the building. "Agent Reid, do you have a message for the public?" one asked. He paused, considering his words. "Yes," he said, "train your perception before you trust your instinct." Then he kept walking, refusing to let the flashbulbs turn him into a spectacle. That night back home, the neighborhood looked different. The same sidewalks, the same porches, but something in the air had shifted. People who once averted their eyes now nodded when he passed. The woman in yoga clothes waved from her driveway. The teenager who had filmed everything jogged up, breathless. "Agent Reed," he said, grinning. "The video hit 100 million views." Marcus smiled faintly. "Then I hope it's teaching, not entertaining." The boy laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, I think it's doing both." He hesitated. "I wanted to thank you for not losing your cool. My dad's a cop. He showed me the video and said, 'That's how a man holds his ground.'" Marcus placed a hand on the kid's shoulder. "Tell your dad that's how a man protects his oath." The streetlights flickered on as the sun dipped below the skyline. It was quiet again, but a different kind of quiet this time. Not from fear, but from understanding. In the days that followed, letters poured in. A father in Baltimore wrote that his son joined the academy because of him. A mother in Seattle said she finally felt safer letting her teenage boy walk home at night. Even a police lieutenant from Georgia wrote, "You didn't destroy trust, you rebuilt it." At the field office, Rivera entered his office carrying a stack of folders. "These are from the director," she said. "You've been reassigned." "In ever 2 days." Marcus looked up, cautious. "To what?" "Command Oversight, National Reform Task Force." He leaned back in his chair. "You're serious?" Rivera nodded. "They want you to help rewrite the ethics code for all field operations. You'll be briefing command centers in every state." For a moment, Marcus said nothing. He just stared at the badge on his desk, the same piece of metal that once symbolized protection, now representing purpose. "All this," he murmured, "because 3 men couldn't see past a skin tone." Rivera tilted her head. "Maybe because 1 man could." Later that week, Marcus stood before a hall of new recruits in Quantico, the same training center where he'd once stood as a cadet. The walls gleamed with new plaques and newer promises. He looked out at the rows of fresh faces, men and women, from every background, every shade. Some nervous, some proud. He took a breath, and the room fell silent. "When you wear this badge," he began, holding his own up for them to see, "you're not just representing the Bureau. You're representing the idea that justice can't afford assumptions." He paced slowly, his voice steady, deliberate. "You'll face moments that test your patience. People will insult you, doubt you, or fear you for no reason. But the moment you lose composure, you lose control. And control is the only weapon worth carrying." The recruits listened, motionless. The silence in that room was reverent. He continued, softer now. "Every second you hesitate between ego and empathy decides who lives to tell the story. So choose empathy first. Always." When he finished, no one clapped. No one dared. They just stood in quiet understanding of the lesson disguised as a warning. Afterward, one of the recruits approached him shyly. "Sir, did it ever get easier? Being doubted?" Marcus looked at her, a young black woman, eyes sharp but uncertain. "No," he said, "but you get stronger. And one day, you'll realize you weren't sent to fit in. You were sent to stand out quietly." Outside, as he left the hall, he paused at the entrance where the Bureau's motto was carved in stone: fidelity, bravery, integrity. He traced the last word with his thumb, the letters cool beneath his skin. Integrity, the only armor that never cracks. As he walked to his car, the evening air carried a faint echo of applause from the ceremony earlier. But in his mind, it wasn't applause he heard. It was his mother's voice. "When the world raises its voice, lower yours." And for the first time in a long while, Marcus smiled. Not for the cameras, not for the recognition, but for the quiet victory of knowing he had turned stillness into change. Snow fell quietly over Marcus's home, the same driveway once marked by humiliation now blanketed in peace. Inside, his mother hummed by the fire as he unfolded a letter from the Bureau, a promotion to Deputy Assistant Director, Civil Integrity Division. He smiled, placing the badge beside the Christmas tree lights. Outside, a young intern he once inspired waved from the street. Marcus whispered, "Justice doesn't shout. It stands still until it's seen." The camera lingered on his badge, glowing in the firelight. Fidelity, bravery, integrity.